Okay, hello everybody. Makayla Davis here with Embodied by Mac. And this video is going to talk about Uranus transits to help prep you as an astrologer or a student of astrology for the upcoming change of Uranus moving from Taurus to Gemini. I'm going to put out a few different videos. So this one today is going to cover Uranus transits that will help you navigate the shifting of this energy beginning on April 26th. But also if it's hitting any of your angles or personal planets. And then in other videos, I'm going to break it down, going through the houses and then hitting the specific planets. So this is part one, and I think it's really a foundation to understand what Uranus transits will bring to an individual and cover, the energy, how the embodied experience. So it's going to move into Gemini on April 26th of 2026, and it will stay in there until May 22nd, 2033. So we have a good 7-year run with Uranus and Gemini, which will bring a very different flavor and a new beginning into the Gemini section of your chart. Any planets that you might have Gemini in, third house links, an angle if it's hitting that, and also the other air signs specifically. And then, of course, the mutable signs will be getting squares and so forth, but I'll cover those in the other videos. So when we think about the planet Uranus, it is a slower moving planet. It's an outer planet. So it has major overarching themes of our life. They hit us directly, but not as personal as, Mars, Mercury, or Venus would hit you as a transit, or even the moon. We kind of see those things more front and center, whereas Uranus transits will affect our life on a more broader scale. However, the impacts are significant because Uranus transits ask for change. And it's up to you if you want to pick that change, if you want to choose to change, if you want to invite that part of clarity that can come into your life or that moment for innovation. You do have a choice, and I will describe what it will feel like if you don't choose, what kind of emotions can erupt, but, this is not entirely fated. There is free will here, but Uranus transits, when they hit, it creates a big impact in the life, and there can be a lot of nervousness and anxiety and restlessness and aggravation and agitation that can come up if we're not acknowledging something within ourselves that is requiring some type of innovation, liberation, or even movement towards more personal freedom. This will totally look different, of course, to every individual because some humans, your charts are wired for more Uranian, makeup. Some charts need more of that freedom about them. You're wired, your chart was built that way. Others maybe not so much. So it may or may not impact you, on a certain level. It really depends on where you're at in your journey and what you're aligned with when it comes to, feeling like you can be yourself, be your individual self, and are you aligned right now with what freedom, um, and even truth with the capital T there means for you, right? So Uranus energy is also the higher octave of Mercury, the planet Mercury, right? So the planet Mercury is how we take in information through the left side of our brain and create our perspectives and our perception of the reality around us and of the world, right? By taking in information, kind of labeling it, processing it, categorizing it, putting it in places, information, 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 not the intuitive sense. That would be Jupiter, right? That would be the feeling realm, the moon realm. Mercury is the intellectual side, more with the mind. Uranus, among many things, is a higher octave of that. So a lot of us astrologers can associate Uranus with, brilliance, innovation, genius, because it is the higher intelligence. It's having sudden clarity, sudden breakthrough stimulation on that mental plane where the information comes in and it shows you the path for the clarity. And it can be accelerated, it can be fast. And that's why a lot of people will, with strong Uranian qualities or strong, Aquarius, even in your chart, they can work faster than other people can because it's that sudden clarity information coming through the left side of the brain. When you're getting a Uranus transit, that can be ignited more, that can be accelerated more. This suddenness, this processing, this information, this clarity, this lightning bolt like of insight can come through. I'm getting this image of crystals just sparking through your mind, and it's the brilliance of it at all, and you can see everything and it pieces together, right? Uranian transits can bring that, but because these are longer transits, it's more often that yes, do these transits bring sudden changes and disruptions to a pattern in your life and to the area that it's transiting or the planet that it's transiting? Yes, that is possible. Yes, it can feel like the rug is pulled out from underneath you. However, if you have the awareness, which astrology brings to you, and you're paying attention from the intellectual, the Uranian part of yourself, and we're going to go through some questions that are helpful to ask you this, you'll see that Uranian transits and that sudden breakthrough often happens because it was smaller things that were leading up to the need for that change. And it is only the breaking or the bursting or the sudden eruption or the rug pulled from underneath you when the individual has been resisting that change, resisting that need to innovate, to do something else differently. And then that's why we might see associated with Uranus transits rebellion, right? Rebellion is one of those words. Well, rebellion is just a forceful reaction to something that has been needing change. The container from which an energy, an energetic thing, event, whatever, situation, whatever, the container becomes so suppressed and distorted. And if the energy for change and innovation is resisted, that becomes the reaction of rebellion. So there's a difference between rebellion and innovation that are quite different paths, but both can happen under Uranian transit. For instance, like if somebody is needing to change careers and they feel it, and we'll go through the feelings, the agitation, right? The anger, the impatience at work, and they're resisting the change, resisting the change, resisting the change. And then maybe their boss does something, sets a rule, an obligation, whatever. And then that individual rebels against it. They snap, right? It's the last straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing. Well, there was many straws being put in, being put in, being put in up until that moment. So you want to pay attention when you're getting your Uranian transit. What is that agitation? What is that feeling? What is that restlessness, right? If you're having it, not everyone does. Maybe you're coaching, maybe you're an astrologer and you're coaching your clients, right? And that's coming up for them. Where is that going on? Because that will show you where there is resistance to this Uranian impulse to innovate, which is to do something from a different path, right? Think of a new insight, new solutions. And mm, I understand, like it happens to all of us, I think, at one point or another, where we can feel that stuckness. And it will accumulate, and the Iranian impulse to change the pattern for us, it can feel frustrated, we can feel stifled, which the Uranian transit can then bring in that feeling of desperation, because the person is sitting in an uncomfortable time in their life, knowing that there is a stifling, there is a distortion happening because there's this inner need for freedom within the self, that desperation takes over because they feel stuck, right? Stuck inside of the pattern. Can't see, for a numerous amount of reasons, a way to innovate, a way to break out, break free, right? So Uranian transits can bring those sudden insights. It can bring situations where there's that one straw that broke the camel's back, and then there's a quickening or a sudden change of course correction. Things that are out of the blue happen. Um, Having this sudden awareness, sudden insight, erratic behavior. And it will look erratic to everybody else, but really within the individual, it's been an accumulation of this energy just waiting to explode, just waiting to erupt. We can see that on the collective scale. We will see that with Pluto in Aquarius and a different, deeper psychological, more intense layer, right? And Uranus moving into Gemini coming up is going to start to funnel that right in, because they're going to make a trine. They're both in early degrees of their signs. There will be that breakup energy, that very, very quick response, right? And decoupling, destabilizing. Uranian transits show up as other people, other events, other circumstances. Transits show up as others outside of yourself affecting you. You do want to go back to your personal placement of Uranus in the chart to see how the transit is helping the soul liberate itself, right? But it's very important, I think, to understand the feeling, the psychological, and the mental effects of a Uranian transit. That's why I love evolutionary astrology. Rather than giving you this forecast of like, well, Uranus is going to go in your first house and you're going to change your appearance. It's deeper than that. It's deeper than that. And if there's a resistance to it, then the Uranian impulse will erupt through other circumstances outside of the individual, right? So this can also show up if you are choosing the Uranian response. It can show up as you working faster than other people, you getting things, having insights more clearly, right? And it's not a bad thing. But when you are choosing to go and liberate yourself from something or free yourself up from something, could be big, could be little. It does look like acceleration to other people, especially other people who are not willing to change. And change is hard, you know, change is hard. But sometimes it's more uncomfortable to stay where you are. And a Uranian transit will show you that, right? So, two things can happen that I was taught. When a Uranian transit is suppressed, when you're not responding to the transit, to this impulse to free yourself up somewhere, right? You can become very impatient with other individuals. Very, very impatient, angry, irritated, because other people will reflect back a need, a change, or something that you yourself are wanting. So you can feel that stuckness and then get irritated from other people, like things that once like were you had patience for because you had more freedom within your energy and your body, you might not have patience for, right? Like lines, like the first thing that comes to my mind is standing in line, like a coffee shop, right? Maybe it's been the same coffee shop you've been going to for 20 years, and all of a sudden, and it's like the same, you always love the same barista, and maybe she just starts shaking it wrong, and all of a sudden you're irritated by things that weren't you were irritated with before. It's a good insight to tell you that you're resisting a change, an impulse for you. Another thing will be solitude, the resistance to solitude, when the solitude is needed. A Uranian transit will require some time alone so that you can cut out the noise from other people who aren't aligned with you. A part of this liberation of the self, or this acceleration really of yourself, is you might not align with some of the people that you used to align with. And you might be fearful of the changes that you need to make. And other people who aren't going through the same thing you're going through won't understand the need for change. And they might resist you changing because a lot of people are uncomfortable with change. But where does that leave you at? Stuck if you're listening to the noise outside of yourself. So some people will resist the solitude that's needed, and the Uranian impulse will kind of force that need. You might get drained from the other opinions of people because you're starting to see a clarity, a path. You're starting to get these downloads through the logical mind, the higher self, right? The logical linear mind will start to be like, hey, here's some mental clarity of where we could give you more freedom in this area of your life, right? These choices could happen. So these sudden flashes and downloads actually need you to be able to take some personal space for yourself, to cut out the noise around you so that you can listen to that creative innovation impulse, that insight, that electricness that is only for you, right? Do not compare yourself to other people during your Uranus transit, because this is an individuated type of transit. This is solely for your individuation process. So the solitude, and some will resist that. So if someone doesn't respond to Uranus transits, doesn't want to change, because the Uranus transit does want change. Again, now it depends on your personal chart, and it might be big, it might be little. But remember, those little things add up to the big thing eventually. The dam breaking, the camel's back, the last straw. One thing that can happen is people get very bored and uninspired with their life because there's no movement, there's no freedom intellectually, body, emotionally, physically. So things can become very rigid and very routine if they're resisting change with the Uranus transit. And then these things will crystallize in that boredom, in that routine. And that can cause the individual to feel trapped in their situation and feeling like there's no point to anything else and there's no escape to their life. There's no escape to their job, their relationship, their health crisis, their spiritual crisis, like whatever, however that's showing up for you, right? It can become very trapped feeling. And the Uranian impulse will come in and agitate that, agitate, 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 agitate. And they'll say, I'm trapped, I'm trapped, I'm trapped, instead of leading into the change. The individual might feel more deflated as well, right? Uninspired, deflated, lacking vitality, lacking inspiration, not feeling alive within their life, right? And it's sad. Like this is sad. Like you can feel this essence of ignoring Uranian impulses. And what's beginning to happen is that unique part of the individual is actually beginning to fade away or feel it actually never fades away. It feels like it's beginning to fade away. Like that person that they believe they could be, or they were felt inspired at one point to be their most liberated individual self, right? It seems like a distant memory and it begins to fade away in the distance. And that's like really sad because it's feeling this loss, okay, of what your true self could be, could show up as. And then the person will not trust these divine insights, this divine clarity, their brilliant idea, that impulsive inspiration that comes through. They won't trust that because they're not building the trust in themselves to actually make the change or to lean in to what Uranus is asking of them. So then that becomes, anger and resentment, jealousy of others who are living their life, making change, accelerating, upgrading. These Uranus transits really bring upgrades to the self because things serve a purpose to a point, and then they're ready for that facelift, that upgrade, that next version of the self, right? So the individual might become very negative, you know, shut off from anything inspirational, maybe a different perspective, shut off from other people's perspectives, ideas, shut off from other people's upgrades and acceleration, promotions, what have you, right? Because that individual who is, resisting this is just more impatient and more full of resentment of other people who are willing to lean into that. And it's a frustrating place for people to be in, to feel stuck. Now, if you choose to tap into the Uranian insight, the Uranian impulse, the transit, the other side of this is feeling more free, feeling more inspired, feeling more accepted because you're accepting yourself, feeling innovative, upgrading your life, upgrading yourself, having more space, room, feeling more like you're an individual, and having a gift and being able to share your gift. This is an important one. Being able to share your creative gift, your creative insight, that inspiration, that change, that whatever freedom that brings you, could bring you financial freedom, physical freedom, emotional freedom. But what begins to happen with the liberation and the cracking open is that actually becomes shared with other people around you, right? Think about the story of Prometheus, very Uranian Aquarian story, where Prometheus stole the fire from Zeus, from the gods, and shared it with humanity. And humanity was like, "Oh my God, Prometheus!" It's the sharing of the genius within you, and being able to transfer that energy and also relieve yourself of things like anxiety and resentment and anger and anguish and dullness, right? When you do lean into that, you relieve yourself, you break it open, right? Whatever has been suppressed and distorted, you crack into it and you let yourself breathe, and you're not weighted down, right? You're free. You can release. You have more free spirit, more wild, natural wildness about you that feels electric and ignited and lighted, inspired, that spark, that excitement becomes movement and energy through the body, and your nervous system will respond in a healthy way. A lot of people, I think, look at Uranian as like a high, like negative nervous system response, but that's not the case if you are leaning into and trusting in the transit and taking a chance, right? Checking the time here because I have a class in a minute. So some questions I want to cover before I end this video of part 1 with Uranus transits. So the first one is of course, now that we've covered the emotional side, right? Is Uranus transits are going to ask you, are you free? In this house that it's transiting in and the planets and the angles that it's touching. Are you free? And if you're not free, in what ways are you not free? It's really more important to ask yourself, in what ways do you not feel free? Because when Uranus is coming, it's time for a change somewhere, right? Especially when it's hitting a planet or an angle in your chart. And then it'll ask you, if you're not free, can you handle not feeling free or not being free? How long can you handle not being free or feeling free? Because that question will arise. It's really important too, because one thing will poke a hole in the camel's back, another one poke a hole in the camel's back. How long can you handle that feeling of feeling trapped, deflated, uninspired, right? How long are you able to actually sit in that energy before it starts to distort whatever's within you that's asking for that freedom? It'll also ask you, how did you get here? And there's no shame. The shame and the criticism and judgment will be normal things to arise for your client or yourself. Totally normal. But do not get stuck in that. Simply objectively ask yourself the question, how did you get here? Because you can start to look at the choices and the options that you had and now have. You might want to ask yourself, why aren't you willing to free yourself, right? What is this cost? If you do free yourself up, what is the cost to stay where you are, right? What is the cost of this freedom? Because this Uranian transit is stimulating the mental plane here, right? It is a feeling, but it's not so much this intuitive thing. We're thinking through the mental plane here, right? Your logic is coming in. What is the cost? What is this? What is this going to take me? What am I going to lose? What am I going to sacrifice? What do I sacrifice if I don't do this? How will I feel if I don't do this? How will I feel if I do? And then look at what is your own individual way of doing things around this area of your life, right? And are you tapping in and trusting in your unique viewpoint and your unique perspective of this situation? Can you trust in yourself? You know, do you trust yourself if you are feeling stuck right now? Do you trust yourself enough to make the change? Do you trust yourself that if you break the pattern, if you steal the fire, do you trust yourself to follow through with this? Do you feel uncomfortable feeling ahead of the curve or being different or changing? And what is the cost of that if you don't lean into that? And then ask yourself, are you willing to take the time for yourself for what matters for you, right? Taking that space, taking that alone time. Are you willing to separate yourself from the group, separate yourself from other people's ideas? You know, do you trust that there'll be, if you have to leave a group of friends, for instance, do you trust that there will be new friends after you take some time alone in solitude? Do you trust that there will be a new job that's better aligned for you on the other side? You know, the important thing here is to see that there are choices and then be willing to make choices, and that these feelings of pressure and anxiety and intensity will arise the more somebody resists the Uranian impulse that can really stir up within the nervous system, right? And these feelings will ebb and flow. They'll ebb and flow throughout the transit. So at times they might be like more intense in the system, in the body, in the mental plane than others, right? So I'm going to conclude that for video one for Uranian transits. So make sure you give me a like if you enjoyed this video, if you found it helpful. Leave me a comment if any of this resonated for you, if you have any insights, feelings, emotions with Uranian transits yourself. Make sure you're subscribed for the next couple of videos coming out over the next couple of days. And also want you to know that I am offering your first 30 days free for my audio horoscopes on Patreon. I will put the link down below. Your first 30 days will be free, so you can try out my daily 10-minute audio horoscope. They go to your inbox every night before the next day. And I just describe the horoscope, the energy of the day ahead for you. And it's kind of a nice way to, you know, keep aligned with, you know, the current energies and kind of feel how things are playing out and maybe what to expect that day, whatnot and so forth. Kind of helps us, you know, navigate the weekly weather with the astrology in the skies. So otherwise, thank you for being here, and my current subscribers, thank you for supporting me. Anybody new here, welcome to my channel. Thank you. I hope you feel called to subscribe, and also share this video with others if you think it would help them along their journey. I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks. Take care.